A few weeks ago, we discussed the future of oil and gas with Oklahoma industry leaders. This week, we've invited a panel to join us for an in-depth conversation on renewable energy sources. There's no question that the green energy industry is continuing to grow here in Oklahoma. Here's moderator Susan Cadot and her guests.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, our guests today are here to talk about Oklahoma and the environment. First of all, I'd like to introduce the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment. That's Kenneth Wagner. Mr. Wagner, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And I'd also like to introduce Johnson Bridgewater. He is the chapter director for the Oklahoma chapter of the Sierra Club. Mr. Bridgewater, thank you for being with us today.
Great to be here.
Well, first of all, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Secretary. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your office.
So as the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment, I am the top policy advisor on both energy and environmental matters to the governor. And I also oversee about 30 agencies, boards, and commissions for the governor. And that includes agencies like the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, the Commissioners of the Land Office, GRDA, the Oklahoma Municipal Power Authority, and the Department of Mines, just to name a few.
Just to name a few. And Director Bridgewater, tell us about what you do for Oklahoma.
Sure. So I am the director of the Oklahoma chapter of Sierra Club, which is fully based right here in our state. I manage an organization with about 4,400 Oklahomans. And I always like to point that out. Our job is to listen to people here in the state of Oklahoma and help them figure out how to make Oklahoma cleaner, greener, and safer for themselves and future generations.
All right, thank you for that, gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. And Director, this first question is for you. What kind of impact is President Biden's green initiative having on the renewable energy sector in Oklahoma?
I don't know that we have seen any impact yet. We know that money is starting to flow from the federal government into state government. The state of Oklahoma already has a very vigorous research program in renewables at its major universities. We're third in the nation in wind energy. We have Spears New Technology, which was the nation's first company to focus on recycling EV batteries. So while I can't say that Biden's jobs plan has started making an impact, we do know that a big focus of it is the infrastructure needed to advance renewable energy and advance efficiency. So we expect it to start having an impact in the near future.
It's easy to forget we're just a few months into this presidency. Secretary Wagner, what are you seeing? What are you anticipating from the Biden administration where Oklahoma's environment is concerned?
Well, you know, we've engaged with the Biden administration in several agencies with their political appointees at the Department of Energy, at the Environmental Protection Agency with their new administrator and his top lieutenants. And at the White House as well. And we're focused on trying to find those areas where we agree and try to make those shared priorities work for us cooperatively. As Johnson mentioned, Oklahoma has a robust portfolio of renewables. In fact, we're one of only 4 states to get more than 40% of its power met by renewable resources. And as a result of our unique energy mix, we've been really strong at reducing our carbon dioxide emissions, as well as some of the criteria pollutants under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards at nearly 3 times the national average since 2005.
Director Bridgewater, is that true? Are we doing a better job than many might think when it comes to renewable energy?
We got off to a fantastic start thanks to an unbelievably vibrant wind energy movement here in our state. The way we look at it, we had an amazing decade, but we believe that we have fallen back off pace with being a true leader. A huge piece of that needs to be solar energy, and the state of Oklahoma has floundered and made some big political errors when it comes to getting solar energy advanced in our state. And that's really where our focus is right now, is trying to add that big piece, especially as battery storage technology is starting to catch up. so that we completely transform our energy markets here in Oklahoma to include all forms of renewables.
You say the state's floundered. How so?
So in 2014, there was some bad legislation that basically drove the large-scale solar industry away from Oklahoma. And for the past 3 sessions, there have been a number of pieces of legislation to advance solar energy in our state, and not a single one of those pieces of legislation have received a reading in a committee hearing. So that's where we would put our focus. Is we really want our legislature and our executive branch of government to fully embrace solar and get it up and running as quickly as possible.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to come to you on that. What are the efforts right now? If we're so great with wind energy, what's the holdup with solar energy?
Well, this is where reasonable minds can disagree, and I certainly respect Johnson and his passion for all this subject matter. But the truth of the matter is, the reason Oklahoma hasn't had a significant uptick in solar energy has solely been price. Now we're seeing the price come down and be competitive with both wind and natural gas. And so as that happens, you're seeing more large-scale, utility-scale solar, as well as what I would call community solar in the queue. The Oklahoma Academy did an energy town hall in 2018 or 19. I lose track because of COVID. It was 2019, I'm sorry. And as much as people wanted to say it was policy, at the end of the day, the real reason that solar hasn't had a bigger impact is because it would cost more and it would cause energy prices in Oklahoma to rise. Oklahoma has 9 of the last 11 quarters has the lowest cost of electricity across all sectors in the United States. And so we've taken the approach that we are fuel agnostic, meaning that we don't want to incentivize or penalize anybody who wants to use a particular energy source or fuel source, and that includes solar. So I'm very sanguine that solar will grow quickly now. In many ways, it fits Oklahoma's energy profile better as we're a summer peaking market. And when do we use the most power? When the sun is at its brightest and heat is at its highest. So I'm hopeful that solar will catch on quickly.
Director, I do want to ask you, is solar more expensive, and if so, why?
Sure. So like any technology, the less it's used, the more expensive it's going to be. As research development has caught up, the last number I saw, solar had dropped 92% in pricing in the last 20 years. The numbers that I'm seeing now from the Department of Energy are that solar will actually become cheaper than natural gas, which is kind of the fossil fuel energy benchmark, in about 10 years. So the dynamics have changed radically. And although solar and natural gas are not equal right now, they're rapidly becoming equal. As in a number of years, solar will actually become cheaper.
All right. I want to shift gears here, gentlemen, to the oil and gas industry. For Oklahoma, and that's a foundational economic issue. It's also a foundational issue for those who want to protect the environment. It seems to be always at odds. Mr. Secretary, I want to go to you. How do you balance nurturing the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma and taking care of the environment?
Oh gosh, that's a good one and an easy one, really. So I think if you're starting with that premise, I think natural gas has done more for emissions reductions in tangible, measurable emission reduction over the last 15 years than any other technology. And so, I know that there are people that come to that and say, well, this is just dirty oil and gas. Well, natural gas has played a significant role. Again, we've reduced our carbon dioxide since 2005 at 3 times the national average, at 35% in that time frame, where the national average is 12%. And we've seen that continue to grow. And so a big reason of that is wind. And the other part of that is natural gas. Natural gas compared to coal is about 70% less carbon and about 99% less on the sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide. So natural gas doesn't really get its due. But we manage that because companies that are big in Oklahoma, like Devon, like Continental, have really had to embrace this greenhouse gas inventory reporting and a lot of the methane regs that they've already actually done a lot of work towards meeting those regs, even though the Trump modifications were pulled back by the Congressional Review Act last week or a couple weeks ago.
So the bigger issue that hasn't been brought up so far in this discussion is that everything we're talking about ties back to one fact, which is climate change is already occurring. We're already seeing drastic impacts to our state, to the United States, to the world. If we don't get ahead of emissions, climate change, the worst scenarios are going to play out. Methane is one of the most potent drivers of climate change. Mm-hmm. We have to do everything in our power to capture every single molecule we can of methane, simply for the sake of our children and avoiding worsening catastrophes that we've already seen unfolding. So, and we can't put a price on a dangerous substance. And any way you look at it, allowing methane to keep leaking into the atmosphere is exacerbating a worldwide crisis that's unfolding, which is climate change.
I believe last April, $35 million was set aside for a new advanced research projects agency dealing with energy and developing tech to reduce methane. And they use the terms in several articles I've read, affordable tech to help reduce methane. So there is an effort to help the small developers. Do you think, and Director, I'm going to stay with you. Do you think there will always be a need for fossil fuel, though, for not just fuel for electricity and gas for cars and vehicles, but to make products that people use every day?
Right. So the residual use of fossil fuels in certain situations, so say metal foundry or specific limited products, I can't say that we will completely eradicate fossil fuels from our reality, but what I can say is we now have energy sources that are cleaner, safer. Some of them are already less expensive, and the bigger ones will be less expensive unit by unit within a decade. We need to look at the bigger picture, which is we have to do everything we can to slow emissions, to slow climate change. That can be done. We have the technology to switch over fully to renewable energy. Energy is not fossil fuels, and I just want everybody to be clear on that. Energy is the ability to do work. We once harvested whales. We once had to harvest forests. Things change, and our second big issue on this is the state of Oklahoma. They do have this workforce that needs to be taken care of. We do need to be thinking, how can we start introducing training into our school systems? How can we start retraining workers? Because the energy transition is happening, even in Oklahoma. It will escalate over time, and we want to make sure that our citizens are prepared for that.
All right, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to get your thoughts on what we just heard the director talk about.
Well, I mean, his idea of an energy transition is true, but keep in mind that renewables right now do one thing and one thing only. They electrify. They put power on the grid. They don't do thermal transfer for industrial uses. They don't power vehicles except for the small number of EVs that we see on the grid. And so what I would say is that regulatory curves and demand curves don't follow regulatory. In other words, people's need to use these fuels will continue long past people's idea. And the director is correct in that we've seen consumers really speak, and that's why you see the investment. I think all Americans and most Oklahomans want to see cleaner energy and us improve our environment. That's reality. But I don't believe you can make the transition as quickly as perhaps many people think. For instance, an EV. I love EVs. But when I sell my car, and get an EV, I'm not going to put my car into the dump. I'm going to trade it in, and it's going to go onto a secondary market. And so that those cars will continue to be in our ambit and in the market for at least 12 years, if not longer. And so the transition to EVs will be much slower, even though we're seeing new cars being definitely moved in that direction. And so I'm excited about a lot of the new things that are coming out. We do see some industrial processes like hydrogen that can be used for that thermal, when the making of steel, for instance, or some of the other technologies that are out there. But you're going to continue to see the worldwide demand for fossil fuel grow over the next 30, 40 years. I've seen it even up to 2080 that these developing countries, when they get the opportunity for cheap energy, they grab it and they start seeing the social benefits of things like refrigerated food and being able to move things much more quickly. I'm a fan of putting more resources on the grid, not less. So if we can get battery and solar on the grid, I think Oklahoma's unique energy mix will continue to lead the country.
Mr. Director, I want to get your final thoughts on this issue. We'll leave you with the final word.
The Oklahoma Sierra Club is made up, as I mentioned, of Oklahomans in all 77 counties. Our job is basically to assure that our children and our grandchildren have the cleanest, safest place to live and grow up.
Wonderful, gentlemen. I can't thank you both enough for taking part in this important discussion, and I hope to have you back again soon because there is so much more to discuss. Thank you to both of you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.